You are now listening to Creator Corner. Welcome to Creator Corner. We're your hosts. I'm Mary.
And I'm Dalia.
And just to get us started, we'd like to start with just a quick friend vibe check between both of us. So friend, how are you doing today really? Or in general, doesn't have to be today.
Thank you, Mary, for checking in and asking about, how I'm doing this week. To be honest, I think the one word that comes to mind this week is hopeful. I'm feeling very excited, of course, to be here in the podcast, sharing space with you and, exploring some topics on our own. So I'm very hopeful and excited about the conversation that we're about to have, but then also, the future conversations that we'll have together as we explore creativity and topics on our own. So I'm feeling very hopeful.
Ah, okay, hopeful. Yes, and I'm excited too to explore our first deep dive topic together. But for me, honestly, it's been kind of like a whirlwind week, a little bit scattered but organized at the same time. And I know it sounds contradicting, but yeah, I think it's just the ebbs and flow of being out of my wellness routine, I think threw me off a little bit. For those of you that don't know, I like to follow a pretty, not strict, but I like to say robust wellness routine with meditation, some journaling, some affirmations in the morning to get my day going. But this past week, I've actually been out of my journaling, so I think it contributed to that scatteredness, but still organized because I still got the other wellness things going on. But I think, it just threw me off a little bit. But I'm excited to dive in again in their first standalone episode.
And I appreciate you so much for sharing a little bit about that scattered feeling. I think it's easy to say that we're doing fine or we're doing okay, but just to be honest about how some weeks do have that ebbs and flows embedded I really appreciate that honesty. And I guess, Mary, I know you said journaling is something that you haven't done this week. And I'm curious, what does journaling do for you, I guess, on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not like a Dear Diary journaler. I'm more of like, not that level yet. I'm more in this, I actually have this really cool journal called Grounded Practice. Basically 3 prompts in the morning, 3 prompts in the afternoon. Could be one-liners, and that's more my pace. Again, I'm not a Dear Diary journaler, but I think journaling has helped me center my thoughts, align it with my actions a little bit more. And I think it just helps my mind kind of pause when I'm writing those 3 prompts in the morning and in the afternoon. So not being able to do that has, again, contributed to some of a little bit of off balance, but I mean, it's all good. I'll get back to it. So yeah, thanks for the question, friend.
Yes, of course, friend. And you're just reminding me of, I probably should get on my journaling. I'm very much the Dear Diary type. So I think it's a nice reminder of that grounded feeling, that writing things down, taking the time to think things through, can just bring this sort of centered, intentional, and being very centered throughout the day. So I appreciate that kind reminder, friend. But to transition a little bit into our episode today, I am super pumped and, as I mentioned, super hopeful about this episode because it is our first real deep dive standalone episode.
Yeah, no, super excited to deep dive on the hot press, the buzz, whatever you guys want to call it, with AI and creativity and kind of the intersections and our thoughts about the impact of AI and creativity and just AI and creativity beyond as we move into this kind of newer era of generative AI. So yeah, I'm excited to do a deep dive on that with you, friend, and hear your thoughts and opinions about it.
Definitely. I think to your point, it's definitely a buzzword. Everyone's talking about AI, especially with the release of ChatGPT taking over the world, basically. So the way that we're defining AI today is actually from, the Center of Governance AI. We'll use their little definition there to guide us, but essentially really defining AI, referring to the computer systems and programs that perform tasks and make decisions that usually require human intelligence. So AI can perform these tasks and make these decisions without explicit human instructions. So when we're talking about AI, that is what we are, going to explore today in terms of that definition. And to get us started, I want to hear your thoughts, Mary, around, as a human of the world and, a soul of the universe, what are your current thoughts about AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think also, for those that don't know, my Aquarius futuristic energy was always like, yeah, robots, yeah, take over like the earth. Always been like pro technology, pro innovation, pro yeah, there's so much more existence outside of humans. But I think it's interesting when we were talking about it in this frame of like AI and creativity. I think it changed the ball game for me of, not that I'm not pro AI. I think there's a little bit more nuances of, can robots, machines really be creative? Because I think at the end of it, my thoughts and opinions are, creativity is the essence of what distinguishes a human experience, but like, can robots be creative? So I think it does add more doubt in a way for me right now. Again, it's not that I'm anti-AI or I'm not pro-AI, but I do think there's a few nuances of, can machines be creative, and does that take away the human essence of creativity if they can be? But what are your thoughts on AI right now? For you, friend?
Yeah, in terms of AI, to give a little background to folks that don't know, I actually do work in the tech industry. And so I'm very familiar with AI as that buzzword in terms of how it's going to find solutions, how it will solve problems quicker and be more efficient. So really seeing AI from the lens of tech. But unlike you, Mary, I wasn't always so excited about AI. Even though I am working in the tech space and I have, come across with how some different companies are thinking about AI in their roadmap and whatnot. I think for me, I've always been very cautious of technology, especially in my lifetime, that I've seen it evolve so quickly, and just the changes from just within our millennial lifetime have made me very, very cautious about the technology. And so to your point, when we're talking about the intersection of AI and creativity, I think this is where like all my fears come in. So I'm a very paranoid person. I'm like, what? Because you're right. Creativity is something that has always been so uniquely human. It's in terms of just that expression and the emotion that can be in your specific medium of art. And so it is a little bit scary to think about the ways that AI can basically dominate something that I see as something that is very spiritual and very tied to our own even like purpose and dharma, some different Buddhist practice call it. So yeah, it is something that in this moment, what I'm feeling is a bit of caution, a bit of, fear, and which is why I think it's so important for us to have this conversation today around AI and creativity and what's going on with these buzzwords.
Yeah, so I guess, friend, in terms of your fears, do you think there is room for AI and creativity to coexist? I guess in your early kind of perceptions of AI and just knowing how much it can take over the creative industry.
That is a very loaded question, friend, and I don't have a clear answer on whether AI can support or will it dominate creativity. I think where we're at today is such the initial stages of how AI is starting to, you know, come into the creativity space. But I will say it's not new the way that we've seen AI in different industries. We already see AI in the healthcare space. We already see AI in manufacturing, taking over some machines there. So AI taking over a specific industry is not new. So when we're talking about AI in the creative industry, it almost feels like it's inevitable, right? It's inevitable that it will also dominate that space. So I don't have a clear answer, friend. But I guess, I'm curious from your perspective, as we've been hearing about conversations about creativity and AI come to the forefront with, discussions around unions, with actors and writers, what are some places, and from your perspective, friend, that you've seen AI already come into the conversation with creativity?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think the most evident one is this whole chat GPT being able to create, kind of not take place of the writer's kind of product, but it could whip up, a whole film script. It could whip up a whole freaking poems and stories, and almost as good as a creative writer. So I have seen it that way, but also in industries like music. I think there was a whole, like TikTok trends of, like so many like mashups that AI produced that sounds so much like the fucking artist. So I think it's in the entertainment industry already. And again, those are just two examples, like, the whole writers section, but also the musicians. But I think it's gonna be like wildfire spread that AI is gonna be so prominent in the entertainment industry, and it does have just impact over these creators. So I think, again, lots of different ways in which AI will impact the entertainment industry. And as we've seen it with, the writer's strike and now the actor's strike, I think there's a lot of repercussions and impact of AI in the entertainment industry if it's not viewed with caution. But what about you, friend? Where have you seen it? Was there any other industries that, maybe we haven't mentioned yet that you've seen it? And yeah, what do you think the impact of it will be overall in this entertainment industry?
Yeah, I agree. I think it will be definitely a wildfire in terms of your point, how quickly it can spread across already it's spreading across the entertainment industry. And which is why I think it's so important for, folks to think about, the types of regulations that need to be in place when we're talking about AI taking over a specific labor force. Because, these folks, these writers, these actors, even authors that are also having to deal with the repercussions of ChatGPT or generative AI. These are folks that have a livelihood, and with generative AI, with ChatGPT, there's no way for folks to get compensated when AI is, utilizing their work again. There's no regulations in place for authors that maybe have books that ChatGPT comes and repurposes for them to get compensated for their work being utilized. So it's already spread like wildfire, to your point, friend, in terms of the entertainment industry. Which is why I think we're in such a pivotal point as these entertainers are currently on strike. We have, the actors, the writers, and a big part of those demands is having regulations around AI, in regards to the ways that studios are currently thinking about utilizing AI in films and music and books and writing. So yeah, it is something that has already spread, and now we're at this pivotal point where folks are fighting for their rights to be compensated properly, or fighting for regulations around AI. So we're in this moment today. You know, the fight, the war around AI is happening today. It's happening today. People are in the front lines having those conversations. And so it does make me think a lot about, if in my perspective, I feel like we're currently in that war around AI, which is probably not as overt as we, thought it with, Hollywood, which is machines versus humans. It's more hidden. It's less obvious because it's going through every industry, and people are having to fight this AI, generative AI, in different ways. No regulations in place. And so, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part is that, I mean, based on just our research of, like, I think it was the Writers Guild, a lot of these creators aren't anti-AI. They just want to be notified when their work is being used, or to be part of that, when machine learners or experts are training these AI tools, they just would like a seat at the table. And I don't think that's too much to ask for, especially when their work is being essentially mined in the internet, when they're teaching these AI machines to essentially look at these huge information, large sets of information that they're going to find in the internet. Because, I mean, a lot of their creators' work is on the internet, and that's how I believe, like, the AI tools are being trained, is to mine these large sets of information. So I think, again, based on this, like, article that we read on, like, the Authors Guild and their stand on AI, they just want a seat on the table. Or if their work is going to be used, they want to be compensated for it. Because I do think that they see the value in the AI's work as, something that can augment their creativity, something that can support and enhance their creativity. But I think the underlying issue, in my perspective, is there's no permission being asked to use their work. It's like their work is not being cited when these AI tools are in place or when they're being used. So I do think there is that underlying issue of, can we get these creators a seat on the table when these machines are being trained? And I think that would go a long way if we can, but I'm not sure if we're there yet.
I'm so curious, friend. And just, there's, like I said, no right or wrong answer here. Who do you think has a seat on the table when it comes to AI?
You know what? That's a good damn question. I don't know, but definitely not these diverse artists, creatives. Clearly not them, because I mean, they wouldn't be striking. They wouldn't be, so cautious against AI or something if they did have a seat on the table. But you know what? Yeah, I mean, I think we know the answer to that, but it's messed up.
The reason why I asked, friend, is because a couple weeks ago, I was, skimming through LinkedIn, which, if y'all don't know, LinkedIn is like this social professional network where, professionals go and share their thoughts on what's happening with AI and other hot topics. But I started to notice a trend on LinkedIn where a lot of folks that had moved away from the Silicon Valley to work remotely in other countries were moving back to the Silicon Valley because, there was an AI renaissance happening in the Silicon Valley. And, companies or founders that wanted to start new AI companies, they felt that in order to be a part of that conversation, they had to move back to the Silicon Valley. So what that reminds me of is, the fact that AI is something that will impact the world as a whole, and yet the power is centralized in Silicon Valley. It's folks that are having conversations around AI or, little TED Talks about it, they're all concentrated in Silicon Valley. They're tech billionaires. These are the folks that are at the forefront of these conversations. And they're not thinking about the communities or the impact that they're having. They're thinking about how they can continue to consolidate this power with their companies or corporations, all very specific in the Silicon Valley. And so I find it very interesting that something that will is impacting the world as a whole is very centralized in one specific region with these tech billionaires that have that seat on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the 1% has the seat on the table, which, again, it's no-brainer there. I think issues like this have come up where the power is so concentrated in whether it's one population or one sector or segment, and I think that has brought up a lot of issues in the past when the power is so concentrated in, again, this one population. And hopefully, we learn some lessons there as this new era of AI and generative AI and augmented AI come up, especially in the creative industry, in the entertainment industry. But again, I mean, we just have to wait and kind of see what unfolds as we learn more about it and its impact and its power.
And as we're talking about where these conversations are happening, do you think, friend, that AI will stunt creativity? That it will be something that will be, maybe there will be more innovation with AI and creativity, or will it just completely stunt creativity? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tricky question to answer, because I see creativity as twofold. I think the ability for humans to really have this wild imagination and have fun with it, but I think it's also to kind of emote feelings and emotions and, that rawness of, again, goes back to the feelings and emotions that these creators and creativity is able to radiate or get out of their audience. So when I think about machines being creative, I just don't know, is it if it's authentic creativity? Because again, they're they're trained to mine all this huge data sets in the internet. Is that creativity? To me personally, I don't think so, because you're just borrowing something that's already been created. So I think there is room, if it's not done well, if it's not regulated well, for it to do stunt creativity in a way where we haven't seen it. But I think if there's space to do it right, put the right regulations, even authenticate what is original work versus what's AI work, could be a
plug-in for NFTs maybe.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, could be something that could prevent creativity from being stunted as we get into these new AI eras, these AI tools. But I do think it has to be done tastefully in order for it not to stunt creativity. But what are your thoughts around it? Is it worth, going into this AI and stunting creativity, or do you think is a room for another set of innovation and expansion and creativity?
Yeah, when I think about the history of just general, I guess, humanity, technology has always been part of evolution, right? We innovated when we found, even cars was a technological innovation. So there's always been innovation as part of history. And for the most part, I find that it's a general consensus that this innovation has been good. It has allowed society to progress and move forward. So almost to think that technology will stunt something, it sounds counterintuitive to me when I think about that context, right? But when I take a step back and I think about what we just talked about, which is who is actually having a seat at the table when it comes to AI, And when you think about that interest when it comes to AI, it tends to be, very capitalistic, very corporation driven. And so it's very for profit is what I'm saying. So these corporations, when they're thinking about AI as an innovation, they're not thinking about how can AI be for the greater good of society. They're thinking about how can AI, save me money, give me more profits. And so to me, unlike other technology that we've seen in the past, AI is so different because it's innovating at a speed that we have never seen. It is innovating so immensely quickly that the research happening around AI is changing every 3 months, every 2 months. Like, this is something that is happening in real time. And because of that speed of innovation, regulations that would make this quote unquote not good for society are not in place. They're right, as Mary, I know you live in Washington DC, so policy is very slow. And it's just and because of that, when I think about just the speed at which this innovation is happening, the lack of people, the communities that are not in the table, the interest behind AI, which is not just capitalistic, it's also very militaristic driven. It's not built for the purpose of creativity. AI was not built to make society better, to make people more creative, expressive, to share art and different mediums of crafts with the world. That was not the intention behind AI. The intention was efficiency, speed, and profit. And so because of those reasons, it's not to say that I think it will stunt creativity. I do think that we will have a very important conversation about the ways that AI will impact labor laws, especially like specific individuals that are partaking in the creativity or creative economy. These are the folks that will be impacted, and it doesn't look like folks are, or society as a whole is really going to be a part of those conversations. And it also doesn't look like corporations are willing to invite communities to the table in terms of how AI will be utilized. So I don't have a clear answer, but I don't think it's necessarily something that the lack of regulation will support creativity. Conversations that I've noticed, as I said, I've been part of tech companies, and their AI roadmap switched pretty quickly. Like within every 2 months, the roadmap was changing. So the conversation and research around AI is, every couple of months, there's new research. You have to push out your research very quickly around AI. And to me, that makes it very difficult to think about the ways that there could be proper regulations in place that will support a positive social impact to society. At least in the short term. I'm not saying that in the future there can't be more regulation. But in terms of AI as well, friend, in terms of the way that it can propel creativity, it's really also important to think about, some of the controversy around AI. And so, friend, I would love to hear your thoughts about that a little bit more. I know the question was around, will it stunt creativity? But I'm going to switch the question a little bit and ask you, what is the impact of, bringing AI into creativity? What are some of the things that are controversial about that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of AI and what you mentioned, how like there's just this huge race on like who's gonna have the best AI models, AI this and AI that. But in terms of AI entering the entertainment and creative space, I think one of the biggest impact of AI, in my perspective, in my opinion, is, again, that it goes back to like the authenticity of creativity. I think it's such a, like, the question I think about is like, is it gonna devalue that human essence of being able to be creative? Is it gonna devalue like human authorship and being in like, I guess in a way, like devalue this part of what has made humans be so unique is the ability to be able to be creative, to use imagination, to, again, going back to like, to radiate and emote these feelings for their audience. But when you put AI there in the middle of it, it's like, where does the creative space of humanity falls into that? I mean, I think it's such an abstract answer, but I do think one of the biggest impact of AI and creativity is that human authorship, that human ownership of the creative imagination, of the feelings that they want their audience to have. But also, I think it's also like, for the consumer perspective, like, how do we know what was really original work, what was really innovative work, what was really creative work, if there's going to be so many different AI tools to not allow us to distinguish from that? So I do think, again, like, from the consumer perspective, but also for the creative perspective, I think there's just like this slippery slope of how much AI can support creativity versus how much it can really impact the way humans think about creativity, and again, in my perspective.
Yeah, those are very fair points. And I think you and I definitely agree wholeheartedly about that human essence that comes into creativity. You know, thinking about the podcast, and one of the questions that we always ask our creators is like, what are some of the emotions that you want your audience to feel through your art? Can we ask that question about AI art? I'm not quite sure. Actually, like, it doesn't feel as genuine. When I think about like Daisy, and you know, that was like a poet on her podcast, and she wrote this work for her community. You know, her specific experience growing up in Oakland, being an Oakland native, undocumented. All these things create a very unique experience that when you're reading that art and you're connecting and you're relating, it's, to your point, uniquely human. And so what I think about when I think about AI is, you know, and we're asking, will it stunt creativity? And I fear that it will stunt creativity for, you know, Black, Indigenous people of color, because creativity, when it comes to AI, as we know, is only a reflection of the data that you're feeding it. And if your data is, you know, biased or racist, then you're basically just, what you are reiterating is those same exact ideals. And that to me is a fear of AI and creativity. What stories will we have in the forefront of our conversations? Will they be genuine to the experience of Black, Indigenous people of color, when as it stands today, there's so much evidence, so many articles that we can probably link in our description below that talk about the ways that AI is biased, facial recognition that is being utilized, that has shown to only basically recognize white faces. And so, I fear that AI will basically prevent our stories from being told. And that's what scares me about AI, is the aspect of it could elevate creativity, but for who and what stories? And, you know, just, that's something that comes to mind right now as I'm thinking about AI and entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, and then that poses kind of these questions of like, where do we go from here? I mean, AI is here. It's not gonna slow down. It's not gonna pause. It's not gonna think about community and diverse voices and diverse storytelling. It's not gonna fact check itself, because again, like you said, it's the tools. It's like what we feed in the internet, this huge, again, data sets that exist in the internet. So I guess, like, what are your initial thoughts of like, is there kind of a way where we can continue to use AI, but maybe use it more responsibly, to not impact, again, the creative and entertainment space as much as it could potentially impact it negatively?
As it stands today, I stand very strongly with the idea that AI will not support our communities of color with the current lack of regulations that are in place. And one specific AI individual that I would like to reference is Timnit Gebru. She is this AI individual that was working for Google, and she specifically talks about the importance of regulation when it comes to AI, and I fully stand with that. I think there's no regulations in place that are supporting communities that are going to be impacted by AI, or the labor force that will be impacted by AI. And because of that, there's huge dangers that we should be aware of as a society if there is no regulation in place. It is something that I believe that we should be demanding, because already we're seeing the ways that labor is being impacted by AI. And so in terms of the future, that's where I stand. I fully stand with this specific, with Timnit Gebru in terms of the importance of regulation in these spaces. And we'll definitely reference some material that she's written about this topic as well below. But as long as there's no regulation in place, it's hard to see a positive future.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would think like by now we would learn. I mean, because like look at social media. It's been alive for like almost 20 plus years now, but we're just barely catching on to regulations. I mean, it still doesn't exist. So it is kind of nerve-wracking that, oh shit, we're in this 3.0, like now it's not even just social media. Now it's this AI, and almost like the Web3 space, what have you. So we haven't caught up in social media regulations. Like, where are we gonna go with AI regulations? Because I do agree that you need both the legal and policy intervention to really make sure that, people of color, especially those diverse creators who really pour kind of their heart and soul out to create the work that they do, aren't negatively impacted by these. But I think another angle in my perspective that the AI could be used a little bit more responsibly is, again, if we include these creators, these artists, these entertainment industry folks in the AI training, or compensate them when it's being used. At the very minimum, to level out the playing field. Like, sure, fine, have AI and use it for the greater good and whatnot, but compensate the people's work that's being referenced. Compensate them for, again, like their creativity. And I think there should be some type of, I think for the creative space, when you're potentially, like when they're signing contracts, there should be some type of amendment where like they're either don't use my work in AI stuff, or if you're going to use it, there should be language around compensation around that, again, to level out the playing field, because I don't think it's inevitable to not have AI in the entertainment industry, but I do think there's ways to level it out at the very minimum by compensating these artists, these creators, and just having a seat at the table. It goes back to that, but I mean, it's harder said than done. But again, I don't think we can stop this AI arms race, but I think there's ways to really do it more fairly, do it right, and just incite the creators and their work.
Absolutely, friend. And I'm reflecting at the beginning of this episode, and I'm thinking, I started with the word hopeful at the beginning, and I'm realizing that I don't sound very hopeful. So I will say that I do think there's absolutely, with any technology, an opportunity for something positive to come. And I did reference like some specific areas where AI has been very helpful in healthcare, for example, really supporting some innovation there around cancer research, for example. There's, some organizations out there that are really doing incredible work to work with specific communities. And I think I read an article specifically, I can't exactly remember where the specific group is located, but they're not working in the Silicon Valley. They're working in that community specifically in terms of understanding how AI can help this community deal with climate change. Because as we know, AI is not just written, it can also be visual and computer vision and stuff. So how we can utilize AI computer vision to, support the way crops are developing in countries that are being impacted with climate change. So there is some net positives to AI, and so I wanted to leave the audience with that there is an opportunity for AI to support our communities and specific communities of color. Yeah. But it's really important to also highlight some of the ways that AI, as it stands today in terms of entertainment and creativity, could really be a threat to creators who already have difficulty being compensated properly. And so it is important to highlight that.
Yeah, and I think just to, again, wrap it up and sum it up, I think what's needed is just guardrails to prevent these threats to human creators, and specifically for the future of the artistic landscape. Because I do think, again, I love me some innovation, I love me some new technology, but I do think it just needs more guardrails to level out that playing field, to make sure people are not being, gypped out of their main living wage. But I also think it's just to do it more responsibly this time around. I think we've learned a lot from the social media era, and now that we're entering this new advancement and technological era, I do hope that these guardrails are in place to not repeat kind of what we went through with social media 2.0.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, yeah, I'm curious to hear from the audience. I mean, what do y'all think? Is AI your friend in the creative space, or is it more like your foe in the creative space? Would love to hear from you all.
Yes, absolutely. Please let us know your thoughts below. As Mary mentioned, would love to hear what your thoughts are on AI and how you're seeing it in your day-to-day life today, if you are. And as we're looking ahead, like Mary, I'd love you to just leave the audience with one word around how we are, wrapping up our AI conversation. That single word there.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Single word for the AI conversation. I think responsible, 2 words then. Responsible disruption. I think it could be done. It could be done.
Yeah.
What about you?
One word, or 2 words? Regulation. That's it.
No, for sure. That's needed. That's long overdue in this space. But yeah, I mean, I think that wraps up this episode. If you guys have not followed us on social media or other streaming podcast platform, follow us at Creator Corner Podcast. And again, I would love to hear from you all. Thank you for tuning in. Creator Corner is a podcast production presented by the Ars Network. It is hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This podcast is edited and produced by Muhammad Abdullah Kawish.